What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the second album by Hurricane Chris. Basically, this album is called Unleashed, and it came out in the winter of 2010, basically the tail end of 2009, and it's the follow-up to Hurricane Chris's 2007 album 5150 Ratchet, which had a number of hit singles on there, two of which were his largest single, A Bay Bay, and then the follow up single, The Hand Clap, which came out both in 2007 and did pretty well. But the thing about Hurricane Chris is he was kind of a snap rap and ringtone rapper that had made a lot of noise, pretty much similar to Soulja Boy around that time and such. But the thing about it was like most artists that had like that hit snap and ringtone kind of album, the second album just didn't do quite as terrific. It was the same thing that happened with, I mean, Soulja Boy at least fared better, but Hurricane Chris did not quite fare as good. But I feel like it's still a pretty good example. It's just kind of a more like it just feels kind of offhanded to kind of talk about Hurricane Chris's second album, and it's not bad. It's going to get a pretty decent and solid score, but it's just kind of the concept that in terms from like a critic standpoint or a label standpoint in terms of the success, it just kind of felt like an offhanded and kind of afterthought of a project. But it's really the fact that it came out over 2 years past his prime years. If it would have came out in 2008, I wonder how it would have fared. But basically, just to be able to say that this is a pretty surprising and charming kind of project that does a lot of things right. And that's kind of the concept where both the singles are kind of more in like a hardcore sense. Like Holly Berry is a good song, but I can kind of see it not being as quite as much of a heavy hitter as like the affable and quotable A Bay Bay and stuff. It just doesn't have that same kind of like, more mutual kind of affability type tone about it. But it is a pretty good song. It's a good underground kind of tune, I would definitely say. But then you look after it like, that happened with Soulja Boy. That happened with other cats like Mims and Jibs and some of those type folks, even though they didn't put out a second album. This is kind of the concept about it, where the singles on here, there are more than one. There's two singles on this project, but it's a pretty snappy project. Has 10 songs on here, but there's quite a few that I wound up enjoying and recommending. So it's definitely the concept about it to be able to get some of this. It's kind of intro. This is a good example of how to evolve when starting off with ringtone rap and such, and those kind of more snap rap tones to kind of have the evolution of still being able to have some hit singles. There were a lot of rappers that were kind of big 2005, 6, 7, 8 that when they tried dropping later in 2008, 9, and 10, it just didn't catch on, and it just was a lot of hullabaloo as far as that kind of went, and the labels just didn't allow them to drop follow-up albums. But I feel like this is a good example of like one that maybe the critics didn't full-blown trust Hurricane Chris past this project, but it's still good enough to say that this is really not a terrible project. It just didn't have the affability, and it's really, when you look at a song like A Bay Bay, I think the concept behind it is just the concept of how simple it is. I mean, in some cases, I would say the simpler the bop, the better in terms of like the chartability behind it. But it's just kind of the concept that Hurricane Chris did keep his lyrics simple, but for some reason it just didn't have the overall songwriting of like his 5150 Ratchet album, which is not, it's just not a terrible project, but it's just kind of the fact that, the labels probably just weren't willing. The labels just probably weren't willing to take the plunge with them. So that kind of sucks, but it's still good. So I do like this album quite a bit. So to talk about the two songs on here, or talk about the two singles on this album. Basically, the first single is Halle Berry's She's Fine, and this is a vanilla kind of club bop with some nice bravado about it. It's got some good energy, and it's an easy kind of regular hit, I would definitely say, and it's very hooky. It's just a good example of like a MySpace and kind of late 2000s kind of rap hit that does a lot of damage and works extremely well. Definitely like the tone of this one. It's just very vanilla sounding, very regular. Halle Berry is just a vanilla and kind of typical kind of bop for a regular night out. I would definitely say it has a lot of bravado about it, and I just overall like the appeal of this song. It's just an easy kind of vintage hit from the 2000s, I would definitely say. Just a good highlight, and it covers this grounds particularly well. It's just the concept that it may not have had the overall sheer bite of A Bay Bay, but this is probably the better song. This is just a more presentable kind of tone. It's just it's got some style about it, and it's just kind of the concept that sometimes you just have to say fuck the labels and just kind of be like, screw it. This is kind of the situation as far as how some of these kind of go, that these were just good bops. They worked on internet real well. They worked on MySpace real well. They worked on YouTube real well. Some of that type fare as far as that kind of went. It's just kind of the concept that, Hurricane Chris did have some boilers. That's kind of the thing. But the second single is Headboard. Second single is Headboard, and this had Mario and Plies on there. It's good to get Plies on the song just because he was kind of starting to phase out of his popularity, and Mario is good with hooks. That's pretty good with that. So Headboard is kind of a vintage early 2010s ladies serenade. This is very similar to the Young Money type stuff that was around that time, and kind of similar to like Nicki Minaj and Drake and some of those type bops that were just throughout like the early 2010s. Just a good hangout gem. It's a good example of a hit down tempo song. I feel like down tempo songs from certain artists sometimes can really be kind of almost boring and kind of malaise and just like a real sluggish sense that just doesn't captivate. But Hurricane Chris did a good example of making like a more lazy, and especially for it to be a single on top of that. This was a single. It didn't chart that heavily, but it's still a pretty good song despite the fact that it kind of had a more kind of down tempo and just kind of more sluggish kind of tone about it. It's just a good example of not quite a ballad, but also not quite a snappy kind of dance hit either. So it's just kind of one. Like a lot of artists would do this with their second single. They would go from like an up tempo kind of festive kind of jive to like a more kind of ballad-esque. And we've talked about this in so many of my reviews that kind of go to like a ballad and more down tempo cut. But the thing about it was I felt like this song hit pretty well. This is a down tempo example that hit in my opinion, but in terms of like the chart appeal that it got, it just didn't really convey that. So it's kind of a problem. It's too bad about that, just because it's a pretty good song. It's just kind of the fact that the labels just didn't really continue to promote this sort of concept, but it's good. I mean, that's just kind of the concept about it. It did its job. So out of 10 songs on here, there's only 2 songs I don't recommend, and there's one almost song. So the 2 songs I don't recommend would be I'm Back and then No Worries, which I'm Back was just kind of a poor way of kicking off the album that just had a pretty poor production that just did not really captivate that well and was not that compelling in a lot of senses. It's kind of a bad intro. And then No Worries was kind of the lone thuggish song on here. No Worries was kind of the lone thuggish song. Now, the thing about Hurricane Chris is on 5150 Ratchet, it seemed like he had more kind of edgy songs that were kind of in a more thuggish tone, like A Bay Bay and some of those. But No Worries just doesn't carry the energy of that well. This doesn't really have like the proper kind of assortment. I mean, the beat is okay, it's manageable, but it just kind of it sticks out like a sore thumb compared to most of these kind of more electro kind of dance and kind of nightlife, jazzy, kind of ritzy kind of vibes of this. Is this kind of one where I felt like it probably should have been more like his previous singles from 2007, more so than this kind of concept. It just didn't translate quite as well. This is a thuggish jam that just didn't. I mean, I could see some folks saying it could have some edge, but I can see some folks kind of almost saying that had some edge, but I didn't see the quality of that on this particular song. So that's kind of the thing. And then Hot Like Lava was the almost song. I feel like this is kind of a thumping kind of dance bop. It's got some pounding energy and it's real quick and snappy. And it's a great get crunk song, but it just kind of has an okay beat. I feel like this is one where the thumpiness is just a very kind of snappy and ravenous. This is definitely a pretty ravenous dance song, I would say. This is probably one of the most festive songs in the album. It's a good song to shake your ass to, kind of similar to Coke Bottle and Holly Berry and Beat It Out the Frame and some of those type ones. Probably some of the most ferocious energy I would say on this project was just the fact that the beat just did not quite captivate as much. I mean, most of the beats on this album, Coke Bottle, Halle Berry, Beat It Out the Frame, even some of the more mellow songs like Headboard and Secret Lover and some of those type ones just have better production fare as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of one. It's got some ravenous kind of energy. It's definitely a real kind of booty shaker, I would say, and it's a good one to kind of get turned wild to, but it just doesn't quite have the addictive beat compared. I don't know. I mean, Mouse on the Track's really good at doing some of those ravenous. I know the type of tone that he was looking for Hurricane Chris, something like Busybody by Mouse on the Track or something like Wipe Me Down or something like that, but that type feel just didn't quite convey as much, but it is good. I recommend it enough. It's the 8th song I basically recommend is kind of in a more almost song format, but some of these ones like Coke Bottle has one of the best beats on this album. This is a real nice Mouse on the Track beat. Sounds like a woozy kind of little boozy song. It's a sluggish kind of distorted nightclub hit, I would definitely say. It's just a kind of a festive good time. This is like a real excellent 1-2 punch with Holly Berry. Coke Bottle and Holly Berry are like an excellent 1-2 punch. They both work as like some ravenous nights out. And Holly Berry's the more commercial one. That's the more standard vanilla fare. But this is like a great follow-up to kind of have is like that kind of goes. And it's the next song that you hear on the standard album. So it's a good one to kind of have in like that fashion. It's definitely one I would refer to in terms of like something if you want something beyond the singles to say, yep, this is a good album cut to kind of mess with. That's a nice one. Last Call with Bobby V is a really excellent one. This has a real mean hook on there. This is a mean nightclub hit. It's an after hours highlight, and it's very hooky, and it's a vibey kind of Chica's cut, I would definitely say. It's a real kind of easy highlight for that sort of concept. This really works great in the after hours. This is another one that you could just hear at a nightclub after Coke Bottle and Halle Berry. It's kind of more of a winding down song, getting ready. Like the song says, Last Call. It's kind of one for like after hours especially, but it just works as like a pretty good, it's a drinking song too. It's a good song for that, just having some late night kind of drinks as far as that kind of goes, and figuring out how you're going to get home and such. This would have to say as far as that kind of goes. Beat It Out the Frame's a pretty excellent one. This is a paced kind of dance highlight. It's a festive kind of night out, and it's a good jivey social gem. I would definitely say this song reminds me of something Lil Boozy would do. Has that same kind of energy, just same kind of jivey dance cut, and that sort of sense that Lil Boozy would just throw out so oftenly, like in the late 2000s. This really kind of has that southern kind of Louisiana kind of appeal. I would definitely say. Even sounds like something Juvenile would do, like a song like "Pop It for Pimp" or something like that. It's that same kind of just raucous kind of energy. I would definitely say it's a good one. Secret Lover is a pretty good one. This kind of slows down the tempo, but this has Cherish on the hook, and they're the chicas that did the song "Do It to It" with Sean Paul or Sean P from Young Bloods and that type of stuff. This is a makeshift and kind of workaday ladies joint. I would definitely say it's a regular kind of out and about kind of day, and it's good for some day commerce. I feel like this one kind of has like that appeal of just being very regular and just kind of in the car, just day commute, this kind of sort of stuff that this is more blue collar. It's interesting to kind of get that sort of kind of more workaday kind of feel from like Hurricane Chris, just because it didn't seem like that was kind of his shtick. But I do like the concept as far as this one just kind of being more regular and just kind of just standard. I like the concept of getting that sort of. I like the concept of getting that sort of song. It's just good for that, just because most of these songs on this album are more kind of leaner and kind of more ravenous dance and nightclub glitz as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of a different change of pace. There's not many songs like this on here, but it is a nice one. But kind of another one that's somewhat similar to Secret Lover is I Want It, which has Fiend on the hook. This is like a good syrupy ladies cut, some day after hours malaise, I would definitely say, and it's feisty, but it's kind of a standard mellow day type feel. I feel like this one is kind of like similar to Master P Productions as far as that kind of goes, and like the beat where he would kind of have like some of these joints that would kind of be like ruminating songs, but just kind of having different. It's just kind of odd that the lyrics compared to the beat. I feel like the lyrics just don't match up with like the production, but it's not like it's bad. I like the concept of having this kind of just being like a syrupy kind of cut. Yeah, I Want It just feels like a sleazy kind of syrupy cut where the production just doesn't match up with the lyrics of the song. It's kind of one that I would feel almost needed to be more of like a ruminating kind of song, kind of air things out kind of song. It's just interesting that this one kind of turned out to be like a ladies cut. I mean, it's a good example of it, but it just kind of feels more of like a mellow kind of day. It's just interesting to kind of have like it being more ruminating kind of vibes, but then kind of being a ladies cut also. It's just kind of like a juxtaposed kind of song, but it works. And it's not an almost song. This is another one that works pretty damn well. So it's a good one for that. I think that about covers it. So me liking 7.5 songs out of 10 on here. That's pretty good. That's 3/4 of the project. I'm gonna give this album like an 8.75 out of 10. If I had liked Hot Like Lava a little bit more, I'd probably get a 9 out of 10. I know 8 out of 10 songs, you would think that that would be an 8 out of 10, but me not liking only 2 songs out of 10 on here, it's pretty good, because if I had liked 9 out of 10 songs, this would have gotten a 10. So it's just kind of the concept. It's just right on the cusp of like being damn near like a Southern classic album. It just had a lot of ferociousness, a lot of compact bite that worked extremely well. Lots of glitzy nightlife. Like the social score you'll see is going to get a good score, but this is an 8.75. And to talk about the social score, I'll go ahead and give the social score like a 10 out of 10. I feel like that many hits, even songs like I'm Back and No Worries are kind of more festive kind of jive on here. So the whole album is like a jolt of social energy, just lots of good stepping out kind of vibes and appeal about it. So that's definitely the thing. It's a classic in terms of just nightlife and standard, even day commute in some senses, depending upon how it goes. It just kind of has some of that malaise. Kind of feels like a more snappy version. Feels like a more snappy version of the stuff that Master P and Lil Boozy were doing. Just kind of a more younger version of those type albums. A more younger version of Master P and a more younger version of Lil Boozy and Juvenile and some of those type folks. It's really snappy, southern fried, really nice pitch as far as that kind of goes, and good sense of nightlife and day life as far as that kind of goes. So 10 out of 10 social. In terms of the future, like that's difficult just because Hurricane Chris has not really done much. Hurricane Chris has not done much recently. I know he's had like a court case and some of that type of stuff. He's had court problems just with like a looming kind of case, looming murder case and that sort of stuff. I just would have to say like he has dropped mixtapes, and I do want to review 5150 Ratchet, but this is a pretty excellent album here. Don't overlook it. I would definitely say it's got some good vibes about it that shouldn't be missed.